IoT Unplugged. Tune in to the Internet of Things. If IoT was made for an industry, insurance looks like an obvious candidate. Constant data stream placed on assets you want to protect? What's not to like? Yet, the insurance industry as a whole hasn't wholly adopted IoT implementation as much as you would think. Yet the benefits on the industry would be profound. Not only could we see reduced costs, but even reduced frequency of incidents. So how could IoT change the insurance industry? To discuss this, I'm joined by Hélène Stanway, co-founder of Sense Consortium. Hélène, thanks for joining us today. If you could start by just introducing yourself, your role in the company, and what the company does for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's my favourite topic, so very much looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Hélène Stanway. I am the president of the Sense Consortium. It is an organisation that sets about driving the adoption of Internet of Things, real-time data, for the purposes of making risk management better in the insurance industry. My background is insurance. I've always had a career in insurance, from operations to data to innovation. And I've been playing, learning, working with IoT for 6 or so years now.
Okay, great stuff. So I suppose I want to start this conversation by talking about the basics with IoT insurance, and that is, why is IoT a technology that can be implemented in insurance?
For me, I think it's actually one of the core technologies that needs to be implemented. Because you can monitor something 24/7, you can see exactly what is happening, whether something is working well or not. That is all to do with risk, and it's all to do with things that you buy insurance for. So, a classic example is if a tap is dripping more than it should, that is a predictor that it might flood. So you can set thresholds and parameters to say, look, if the water volume goes above X, actually, do you know what? I need to call a plumber in. You call a plumber in, and guess what? You don't then get a flood. Within insurance, the top 3 causes of loss are flood, or escape of water as we call it, fire, and theft. And if you think about it, we know in our industry of devices that can help mitigate all of those 3 top causes of loss, and many more.
Well, interesting, you mentioned the water, and then you said, fire and theft. I was wondering, what other types of insurance can it apply to? Is there a kind of like, it's great for some things, but maybe there's other things that it operationally won't make sense in, or?
It really works very well with things that are physical assets. So it's unlikely to be suitable for something in the metaverse, for example. And there are many new risks emerging because of the use of the metaverse. But it's anything physical, so something where you can put a device on it are the most common use cases. So from a fire detection perspective, even something as simple as, are the sprinkler systems on or off? You would not believe the number of claims that have been because the sprinkler system simply hasn't been on. So you've got risk mitigation or incident mitigation capability there because you've got sprinkler systems, but they're just not switched on. And actually, one of the big predictors of that there's going to be a fire is a draw on power, so a draw on electricity. So if you can put a device on your assets, your machinery, and suddenly it's starting to take a lot more power, that should be a trigger for you to go in and have a look and repair it before it then becomes a much bigger incident and, a very damaging fire.
Okay, well, I suppose I was going to ask what is an example of IoT in insurance, but I think that's a great example showing being able to predict, not only just manage when something happens, but being able to predict maybe something that happens. So there is a lot of mitigation involved with IoT. What can there be an effect with regards to the insurance side of things? If how would insurance companies adapt their strategy if they know there's sort of IoT implementations in place at, let's say, a manufacturing warehouse where they have IoT-enabled machinery?
I think that's a great question, because I don't think that the insurance industry is as advanced as it needs to be to serve its customer base. I'm specifically talking in the commercial insurance sector, because, for example, something like Sky Protect has created a great set of products and services for the home. but we don't see that in the manufacturing sector. What it really means is a shift from the types of policies that people buy today to really thinking about what are the service models that you can have alongside your insurance. Because what you really want is something that is going to protect you in the eventuality of a flood or a fire. So you don't want to be scrabbling around thinking, my goodness me, where's my plumber? Where's my, electrician? You want to be able to have somebody that you can call that you know is going to sort that out for you and is going to pay out when you actually have an incident and you have that claim. We're not anywhere near that yet. And that's a shame, because the adoption of devices by the clients that the insurance industry protects are really driving forward with IoT, but the insurance industry is lagging behind other than a very few vanguard organisations.
It's funny that you should mention this, and obviously you mentioned before IoT almost seems like one of the best bedfellows for insurance, but why has there been this sort of, I don't know if you want to call it hesitancy or maybe like lack of interest from the industry as a whole in implementing them more into their, risk management strategies? Or
so the Sense Consortium has done quite a lot of extensive research in this area, because adoption and the things that we need to do to drive adoption are sometimes quite simple, sometimes quite nuanced. But the research that we did showed that there were approximately 21 different adoption blockers. They range from things like the insurance industry has priced risk in the same way forever. And it is typically on a set of risk factors that are quite what we call quite static. So, for example, if you think about a building, some of the risk factors will be the construction of it, so what materials have been used. It'll be how many floors it's got, whether it's got a sprinkler system, and so on. But those sort of things don't change every minute of every second of every day. They're static risk factors, but that's how they price risk. Enter IoT, where you've got potentially thousands of data points every minute, and you need to sift through all of those data points to understand, well, which are the bits that are interesting and meaningful from a risk perspective, and therefore which of those parameters are going to influence my pricing. That is really, really difficult. Difficult because people have to change the way that they do things. Difficult because they have to try and bring together static and dynamic data to make a decision. And it's often been put in in the too hard bucket. But as I say, some organisations are really starting to cotton onto that, but it is slow and not enough. Then you've got things like, who owns my data? You've got the clients saying, well, actually, if I give my insurance company all of this stuff, all of this data about my buildings and my assets, my ships, whatever it is, they're just going to put the premium up, aren't they? And actually, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think the sort of the party line is, do you know what? The insurance industry will charge a premium that is commensurate to the risk, because it's got more information, it can price correctly. That may very well be that premium is going to go up, but it also may very well mean, do you know what? You are super well risk managed, better than I thought. Actually, we're going to charge you less. So there's a whole bunch of quite nuanced things, and those are just two of them. And there's another 19, 20 that we have discovered are blockers.
Well, you talk about this amount of data that could maybe inform about maybe if risk needs to be evaluated, but it needs to be sifted through. I'm wondering, is this perhaps where, AI IoT is going to really help in this regard, because it can maybe, make sense of the data a bit more, so that the collection of it is starting to make a bit more of a coherent picture for insurers?
You are absolutely spot on. Yep. AI and IoT together are really where the magic happens, because there's no way a single human being could possibly sift through the quantum of data to make out, to create something meaningful from an insight perspective that would have an impact on risk. But absent of the IoT data, the AI is also limited, because it's not getting fed information about the property or the ship or whatever it is, to be able to get these new insights and new ways that they could think about risk and improve it. And actually, as an add-on to that comment, we know in our insurance industry there is a lot of underinsurance. So people are not buying enough for the cover that they need for the value of the things and the assets that they have. And actually, IoT and then AI on top of IoT to make sense of all that data can start to address some of that. Because actually, the worst thing that can happen if you have an unfortunate incident or an event, and the insurance company says, well, actually, it was only your insurance is only £10, but the value of your thing is 20, you're going to be pretty upset. Actually, you want to buy the right coverage for the risk, so you want to buy it at that £20 level. And okay, yes, you're going to pay the premium for it, but that's why you buy insurance in the first place, to cover you when things happen.
So is that when you talk about this sort of access to the data, some people wondering, if you have IoT or these sensors that will help kind of with your insurance, would there be a situation where would the insurers keep the data a lot to themselves, or is there sometimes like a collaborative share when the obviously the person who needs their asset insured is also being informed of the data, so they can perhaps implement better practice or something like that?
You're absolutely right. So you would need to look at the data at an individual insured level, and you would look at it on a portfolio level, because what you want to do is to go back to your point, to use AI to have a look across multiple different, say, properties. And you might say, I don't know, this is a stupid example, right? But you might say all of the houses that have got pink roofs are a better risk than all of the houses that have got purple roofs. But you can only tell that when you've got a sufficient quantum of buildings, and then you use AI on the top of that to say which is the better risk. But it is all about identifying issues and fixing them before they become a claim. So I worked on a project within an industrial bakery, for example, and we put IoT devices in, and the IoT data almost immediately said, you have a problem with your air handling unit in this particular bakery. And we said, you need to go and fix it. And they were like, oh, da, da, da. Obviously, the story wouldn't be a story if they had gone and fixed it, because we didn't fix it. And what could have been, I think, something like a £20,000 repair bill, which I know is not insignificant, actually ended up being a £150,000 bill, because guess what? The whole thing broke and they couldn't even fix it. They had to go in and replace it. So, even that as a return on investment, just that one thing made a massive difference. But it's about being much more conscious of looking at the data, looking at what it's telling you, and then going and repairing and fixing, because actually that has several knock-on impacts. One, ESG, because you're not replacing something, your assets are lasting longer. Business interruption. To take that air handling unit out, they had to stop production for far longer than had they just gone in and repaired. So they can't use the factory. So again, they're making a loss by virtue of less production capacity. So there's a whole bunch of knock-on impacts. The other thing I'd say from an ESG perspective is, whilst IoT has a very, very big impact on risk, it clearly also has a big impact on your ability to monitor how much power or how much water you're using. So again, you've got a saving in that element. All helps towards your business case, and everybody wants to be more ESG conscious. And certainly within the insurance industry, there are early indications and early research, and this is slightly obvious, that the better somebody is from an ESG perspective, and that by that conscious and doing all the right activity, they are a better risk. If they're a better risk, guess what? They get a better price.
Well, and everyone likes that.
Absolutely. And guess what? Fewer claims. Even better.
Well, the benefits of IoT insurance seem quite clear, but I was wondering, why should insurance companies sort of front up these costs? Because there is uncertainty about maybe consumer adoption and the future of the IoT landscape.
I personally think that the benefits case are so strong. For me, it's a no-brainer. And with all these things, it's very easy to say, I'm not going to do it yet because something better will come along. You wait a year, I won't do it yet because something better will still come along. You get paralyzed through inaction. For me, it's about using what's there, but creating it in such a way that if something better, when something better comes along, you're able to swap things in and out, whether that be devices or an AI capability, because the pace of change is accelerating ever faster. You don't want to get yourself in a situation where you can't move and you can't change. So it's about being clever in how you implement them and which providers you work with to make sure that they keep on top of the latest tech, and then you then are able to use the latest tech as well and get those maximum benefits.
Okay. Would you think maybe if some insurance companies are interested in implementing IoT, but they see it as a big risk, do you think that there's sort of ways that they can step into it without fully, converting their whole operations to being, fueled by IoT data, maybe certain elements of it? Or
Absolutely. I mean, in this day and age, it's all about experimentation. But you would enter into a landscape where actually there's already been quite a lot of experimentation. We've already proven at an aggregate level that IoT is of a benefit. It's then about saying, well, which devices should I be deploying and for what purpose? And for that, what you would do is you would go and have a look at your history of losses. So where am I seeing the most incidents? So I go back to escape of water, fire and theft. Those are the top three. Well, hey, let me go and target devices that look at those top three things. So let me look at water sensors. Let me look at things that look at the power consumption, and put a device on your tools or what have you to have a look from a theft perspective and be able to trace them. So it's about understanding what has happened and try and be as closely aligned to those events and incidents to then devices associated to them to then minimize those particular things. But you can experiment. These devices are not gazillions of pounds. They're very, very cheap, and you can experiment very quickly within a matter of weeks, and you can get data straight away and start learning about these things.
Okay, so obviously we've talked a lot about the benefits of IoT insurance, but I was wondering maybe some associated risks. For instance, let's say you've got like a property, and the property is of a sensitive nature, and if the IoT devices get hacked, for instance, is there now, in extra protection, is there some way that insurance companies now open themselves up for a new element of litigation through having these IoT devices? And if so, is there maybe any way that can be balanced to minimize or stop this?
Yeah, I go back to, I think was it 2015? I can't remember exactly when. And the infamous fish tank example in the Las Vegas casino, where they put a sensor on the thermometer in the fish tank, completely unsecured, and of course it got hacked, and they were able to take quite a bit of data. So it is a very, very real risk. You're absolutely right. So by putting devices in to look at how your assets are operating, you need to do them absolutely securely. And a lot of work is being done actually by the government and device manufacturers to make sure that there are robust both physical and cyber considerations as and when you deploy them. But even things like making sure that you deploy the sensors within your own internal infrastructure, because you've then got the protection of your own firewalls, for example. I know of one device that has got I'm going to describe it very badly, but it's got kind of two parts to the device, and it's got a very deliberate break in the middle of the device so that you can't then hack through to the other side, so to speak. So people are very conscious now about how they deploy and how they create IoT devices, but it is absolutely a risk that people need to consider.
Okay, well, going on from that, you've mentioned previously in our discussions that there's perhaps a perception gap regarding IoT and insurance. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, and what is the gap, and why do you believe it needs to be bridged?
So I would suspect, no, in fact, I don't suspect, I know that clients are deploying IoT, and they're doing it for absolutely the right reasons, because they want to maximize their operations. And they've got to do a business case, and they've then got to set up an experiment, learn, deploy, all of that good stuff. Not one person I have spoken to who has done that within their operations even thinks about insurance. It doesn't even come into the consciousness. And actually, it could be quite a strong lever to your benefits case, because if you're improving your risk over time, your premium should reduce because you've got fewer claims. But it's not even that isn't even a perception gap. It is, you just don't think about it. And yet it's a real added value to your benefits case and actually how you manage your operations. So a lot of what I do and a lot of what the Sense Consortium does is all about trying to join the dots between, in this case, commercial property owners and the insurance industry to say, hey, there's benefit and value on both sides. Perhaps you should talk to each other about what it is that you're doing from an IoT space. And even when, we all love buying insurance, don't we? We love to fill forms out, but there isn't a question in there from an insurance perspective back to their client base to say, are you using IoT? So there's a gap on both sides in terms of, is it being used? How is it being used? What is the business case? And where, connecting those two sides to make an even more powerful story.
Interesting. Are you, could it be the case that, for instance, companies that are, for instance, very leveraging IoT very heavily, when they take insurance out, instead of maybe the insurance company wanting to implement IoT devices, they maybe say, well, can we get access to the data from that device and then we'll use that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the insurance company doesn't have to be the one that supplies devices. If the devices are there already, let's just grab that data and have a look at it. And we can anonymize that data, but it's about having a look at it, picking out the data points that are relevant to risk, as I mentioned earlier, and then using AI to make some sense of it and understand what's happening and say, oh, this is getting a bit hot, that's getting a bit cold, you haven't serviced that isn't switched on, or whatever it happens to be, and just make those both immediate decisions, but also over time, so you can see things, whether they're getting better or worse, and again, go in and sort of fix things before they really become a problem. So yeah, it works both ways. Win-win.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of win-win, I was wondering, let's say the insurance industry wholesale begins to adopt IoT, what would the industry then begin to look like? Probably fewer claims, maybe, as you suggested, mitigation. But is there any landscape you could paint for us?
My absolute dream, how sad is this? My absolute dream is I would love the insurance industry to shift from being an industry that sells you a product to an industry that sells you a product and a service. And actually it sells you a service that happens to have a product in it that you kind of don't see. Because actually the servicing is all about accessing a plumber, an electrician, elements that need to be there to repair, so the widget in your engine that needs to be fixed, to make it easy for people to repair things, fix things. And I think, us as a culture has gone that way. I mean, think about the repair shop and, all of these things about making the stuff that we have either shared or last longer. And that's all enabled by IoT. So I've gone off down a little rabbit hole, but from an insurance perspective, we should be developing those services to make life easier. And then if something does happen, then yes, they're there to pay the claim. But actually, nobody wants a claim. I know there's a bit of a cliche that insurance companies, do or do not like paying claims, but nobody wants a claim because we want the economy to keep going and not have business interruption and, issues and incidents.
Well, I think that is a really great place to leave it. Hélène, thank you very much for today's talk. It's been really insightful, and we'll look forward to more editorials for you on the website, and we'll be sure to attend your upcoming events.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Remember to subscribe to IoT Unplugged wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to share with anyone you think would find it as interesting or as informative as you have. IoT Unplugged. Tune in to the Internet of Things.